Finally lost it with my prank-loving boyfriend after he trapped me in a humiliating situation during an Int-mate moment. I've been dating James for just over a year. We have a really good relationship and we are good with communicating any issues that we have come to. I am very much in love with him and we are happy. Now, maybe he is very comfortable with me now, which I know is a good thing, but I'm very frustrated and I don't know if it's just me. This is the only issue I have with him. He's just constantly farting and burping and it's starting to really gross me out. It feels stupid to even type that. But it's really become excessive. We are both graduated from school and work full-time. We do not live together, but he is starting to move into my apartment. This started about 5 months into our relationship and it has gotten progressively worse. He will burp constantly and blow it into my face, to a point where I will start dry heaving, because he thinks it's funny. He does the same thing with farting, always trying to do it on me because he thinks it's hilarious. I know it's normal, I grew up with 4 brothers, but he is constantly forcing it to happen. This is not once or twice. We have spent almost every night together the past 6 months, and it will happen all night. All night. I have asked him to please stop because I find it really gross, especially the burping because he will do it in my face and it turns my stomach and he will apologize but still continue to do it. Or lean in for a kiss and burp in my face instead, then laugh himself to the point of tears when I act disgusted. I thought maybe, at first, he was just really gassy and I should be more understanding because it's a natural bodily function. He does not do this when we are out to dinner or with friends. A few months ago we went to a wedding together with some members of his family and he accidentally burped really loudly like he normally does when he is alone with me, and our table went really silent and glared at him. I didn't want him to be embarrassed so I high-fived him and said good one. And the whole table started laughing and cheering and he pulled me aside and said he was thankful I did so, as he was humiliated but I broke the ice. I was a bit drunk and frustrated so I asked him why he does it to me constantly but he wouldn't do it in front of other people. His reasoning is that I am his girlfriend and he should be able to play around with me like that. That I was being a typical girl for finding it rude, uptight, high maintenance. I didn't want to argue about it, so I told him I was none of those things and he knew it. Cut the bullshit, we'll talk about it later when we're sober and just have a fun time at the party for now. And we did. But it never changes. I've tried to make plans to be out of the house when we see each other, because even though it seems ridiculous it's starting to stress me out. I can't talk to any of my friends about it because they think it's so funny. He is a very sweet guy, I like spending time with him, but I feel nauseous when we are alone together because it's just so gross. He is starting to work longer shifts so he wants to stay in a lot most nights to relax. He started doing it during sex, as a joke, and our sex life has really suffered because of it. A few nights ago he was texting me before he got off work, complaining about his day and he seemed really stressed out so I told him I would come over and I'll make his favorite and I'll make him forget about it. So I went over to his house and started cooking until he was off. After dinner he leaned in to kiss me, and I turned my head because I'm so used to him burping in my face. We had an argument because he was accusing me of cheating. We haven't been having sex. I told him it was because of the burping, and he said I needed to get over it, that he was only joking and I was being such a prude. That his girlfriend shouldn't reject a kiss from him yada yada. I told him that I've been saying this is a problem for a while, I don't think it's funny at all. I have thrown up because of it. He started to laugh as I said that. And I just kinda lost it. I don't really yell at people, I am a calm and collected person, so I scared him a bit. I told him it was disgusting and I am getting to the point where I'm no longer attracted to him, that I've been trying so hard to be understanding but it's a two-way street. It wasn't to me about something being gross or funny anymore, it was about respect. He kind of got defensive, trying to throw in how I was overreacting, being ridiculous, but I shut it down and he apologized because he apparently didn't know I felt so strongly about it. He would try not to do it anymore, at all. I don't care that it happens. I only care that he forces it. Etc. Now, having talked it out, for the next couple of hours he actually didn't try to burp in my face or fart on me. I was so happy I could enjoy cuddling my boyfriend without trying not to vomit. So I started unzipping his pants, to make him forget about his bad day. You already know where this is going. It's humiliating but I'm going to type it out anyway. As I was trying to blow him he pushed my head down so I couldn't get away and tensed up and started farting loudly, while laughing. I was so frustrated I started crying immediately. I think he realized he did something wrong because he let go of my head and tried to hold me and he kept saying I'm sorry, I thought you meant to do it less. I thought it was going to be funny, to break the tension from before, but I got up and left his apartment. That was 2 days ago. He has tried calling me, texting me constantly. I have not responded. His messages range from being very apologetic to very angry, back and forth. I don't know what to do and I feel like this relationship is over but I still love him. I feel also, really gross and violated in a way. Our mutual friends have been texting me as well asking if everything is okay, and I've tried explaining the situation to my best friend but he found it hilarious. So I'm afraid to explain it to anyone else. This is just so stupid. I literally feel like I'm crazy. Maybe I am uptight etc. I also have a lot of his stuff over here that belongs to him and I'm worried he will come back to get it and I'll have to face him. What should I do? Am I just overreacting? Update 1. Last night I was pretty miserable and just felt confused and sick about the whole thing. It really helped me deal with what I was feeling and rationalize, reading what everyone had written. I just want to clear a few things up before I get into how this is climaxed for me. My boyfriend did not start out doing this constantly. I remember the first time he did it I was confused and told him right away I did not like it calmly and he seemed to understand. I have never laughed when he did it purposely. I know the difference between an accident and what he does. A lot of the replies helped me examine my relationship as a whole. We have had other problems that seem to fit the same pattern. He had the same behavior with driving very fast for fun and he had the same issue with playfully pinching and tickling, but he was doing it so hard it would leave bruises. I always expressed that I did not like this, but he was insistent that I was overreacting. When I showed him he was actually hurting me, he stopped completely and never did it since. I didn't think it was an important thing to bring up. I think it's a bit harsh to call him abusive. Because he respected that boundary. I know a lot of people were suggesting that I do the same thing to him, or retaliate in the same way, and it might sound nice to entertain that fantasy, but I'm really not like that. I will never let someone else's actions define who I am as a person. I know I will never try to intentionally hurt someone, and that makes me have faith in myself. A few of you made me really cry because before I wrote my post I was completely unsupported and I felt alone and, well, really ridiculous and dumb. So thank you very much for taking the time to help me even though I'm a stranger and none of you owe me anything, let alone your time and kindness. Thank you. Now on to today. I have not replied to any of James' messages. I blocked him on all devices. I feel like I basically told him was over and he knew that. I have messaged a few of our mutual friends back saying that I would really appreciate it if they would just drop it, that everything is okay with me but the relationship is over between us. A post said I didn't have to explain the situation completely, so I did that. They seemed very understanding except one replied saying over a one-time incident? Get real lol, but so long as you're happy it didn't really bother me, because I know the truth. It was hurtful that James may have lied, but I'd rather surround myself with people who value honesty. I also invited my best friend over and asked him if he could help me box all of James' belongings, to which he agreed right away. He kept asking me what happened, and if I was okay, so I showed him this post and he was disgusted. He apologized for laughing when I had tried to tell him earlier because he said he didn't know it was so serious. He offered to take James' belongings to him, but I made him promise to not be hostile or I'd ask someone else. He agreed. We spent a lot of the day in my apartment. When the front door opened. It's hard for me to articulate myself, but I'll try to type it exactly as it happened. We both heard it and stopped talking immediately. It was James. I'm not going to lie, I was immediately frightened and maybe I could have handled it better, but I kind of just stood there. I just didn't expect to see him. He has never showed up at my home or work without a warning. My friend asked him what the fuck he thinks he was doing here. James kept staring at me and ignored him, saying I thought you were dead or something. Why have you been ignoring me? My friend stepped in front of him and handed him one of the boxes and told him he could take his stuff and leave, that it was over and I didn't want to talk to him. James laughed and made a move towards me and said I needed to talk to him alone, but my friend moved in front of him and told him that he shouldn't be in my house uninvited, that it was illegal and he was going to call the police. Then James got really mad and twisted his face all weird and I can't explain it, but he started yelling and it was like he wasn't the same person at all. He called me a slut and a cunt and said that I was some ridiculous princess and he just kept going. My friend, telling him that's nice, now you need to leave or I'm gonna make you. And then James threw down his box and punched my friend in the face. I don't remember exactly, but my friend fell back and James came up to me and he grabbed me and started shaking me, saying I was stupid for throwing this all away and that I was probably sleeping with my friend. I was very afraid and I couldn't believe this was happening. My friend got up and grabbed him by the back of his shirt and threw him off me and shoved him out of my apartment. James ran away down the hall kicking people's doors and screaming. My neighbor had come out of his apartment and asked what was going on and I told him to call the ambulance because my friend was bleeding from his nose. I was so embarrassed. At the hospital I kept embarrassing myself, crying and apologizing to my friend while we were in the waiting room. His nose is broken, he keeps making Owen Wilson jokes/impressions, but he is okay. Now, I am at my friend's house because I'm afraid to go home. He said I can stay with him for as long as I need to. I feel really awful that my friend got his nose broken because I was a bad judge of character. I also feel really guilty that I got so scared I just kind of stood there and let my friend get hurt. My friend is taking me to the police station to file a report, but I just want this whole thing to be over, but he is being insistent because I need to do this to ensure my safety. This is my first relationship and I don't even know if this person was real. I didn't think this was even possible to happen. I don't understand what I missed and I feel like I'm vibrating inside because of how frightened I am. I want to go home to my apartment, but I'm afraid he will come back. The way my head is does not make any sense. I feel ashamed even writing all of this because it was from something so small and juvenile, so I don't know, I'm just handling it weird or my head is blowing it completely out of proportion. Update 2. It's been a trip rereading a post I made a decade ago. A friend of mine actually sent this to me because it reminded them of an anecdote I had shared with them a few years ago. Lo and behold, it was my own words. Rereading it has been a bit harrowing to say the least, but the mindset I had back then was completely different. I was a very meek person and my brothers treated me the same way in my own family dynamic. Obviously not with the sexual stuff, but being able to do things that bothered me or hurt me and I wasn't allowed to complain, so it was normalized for me. To answer your question, no, my best friend and I did not end up together. We're still very close, but our relationship has always been platonic. I actually helped him with an ex a few years after this, though it consisted of less bodily functions. My gross ex. After this, and despite pressing charges, he did try to harass me for a while, almost a year if I recall correctly. I think he just liked the feeling of making me miserable and couldn't let go or comprehend how I was so thoroughly under his finger, but ended up pushing back, so it was hard for him to relinquish that. Not of me as a person, but of that feeling of control. But for the first time in my life, instead of shutting down, I was actually angry, mostly on behalf of my best friend for being hurt. I knew my friend did not deserve to be attacked like that. I did end up focusing on myself, and I went to therapy, for both the relationship and other factors, family, etc., so I could be a healthier person, as I said in my last comment on that post. I didn't date anyone for a while after, and focused mostly on building friendships and self-reflection. There were a lot of red flags I missed besides the other ones I mentioned in this post, like how he aggressively pursued me, sexual things despite my inexperience, etc., but hindsight is indeed 20/20. Now on to second story. Clashed with my husband over my parents including his daughter in their estate plan, arguing she is already financially well covered. I, 35F, have 2 kids, 17 male and female twins, and 1 stepdaughter, 18, who I met when she was 11. The other day, I was at my parents' house going over some estate planning as I am the executor. While reviewing, I saw my folks had split their assets to be half for my 2 siblings and I and the other half for their grandkids, all to be distributed evenly. My stepdaughter was included. When I asked them about this, they said they wanted to be fair. Their estate isn't super large, but the sum would be substantial, think new car. I told my parents that while generous of them, I didn't think it would be necessary and would be better to split between their 5 grandkids. When we got home, my husband said he overheard what I said and that I was being an off for alienating his daughter. I told him my reasoning was because she is the only child/grandchild/niece on both her parents' sides and that she would be set. Her grandparents own multiple properties, her uncles are fairly well off and live in a Huckall area, and well, she's the only kid and it's not looking like, at least in his side, that she'll have any cousins. Plus, their collective net worth is substantially more than my side. I also asked him if his parents included my kids in their estate, but he refused to answer. Still, he said I was being an and accused me of not caring about her future. I think I was doing the right thing by looking out for my kids and their cousins. Ida? Edit, I was told to include this in the post. 1. I didn't argue with or pressure my parents to make a change. I simply mentioned that I don't feel it was necessary for her to receive a monetary amount. 2. My mom plans on giving her a set of family heirloom jewelry that is her birthstone. I think this is quite thoughtful. I'm not a big jewelry person and she has other sets for the other girls in the family, so I feel this is okay. 3. My parents have seen her about 3-5x a year since I met her. 4. My nephews and my kids do not have active relationships with their biological father sides. My niece is a new mom and works at a restaurant. I feel that financial inheritance would be more impactful for them even as such a small amount. 5. I know my SD is set to inherit at least 2 houses in a major city with call. I found this out a while back after my husband asked me to help him organize his office. I had to read through papers to know how to file them accordingly. The paper was a certified copy and was drafted soon after we married. My kids were not included. I am not sure if it has been updated. I did not ask him about it at the time because I did not have an issue with it. 6. There is distance in the relationship, but I don't feel it's my fault. I can explain this. When I met her mom for the first time, she made it very clear that I wasn't her mom. I didn't see this as an issue because I did not want to overstep, and as a mom myself, I could see where she was coming from and respected her request. But as time progressed, our opportunity to spend time together became less frequent. At first my husband had every other weekend visitation. It became less frequent as she became a teenager because she wanted to spend the night with friends, hang out, etc., which I see as normal teenager behavior. The other piece is that we were never invited to be included in major celebrations for her. We usually celebrated birthdays with her a week after because we weren't invited. My husband was just not us. She's also never spent Thanksgiving or Christmas with us because her mom wanted those days. Again, which I saw as fine because that's her only child. My husband would spend holidays with her at her mom's house, which I encouraged because I knew the importance of father/daughter connections. We also were not invited to her HS graduation. I think she's a beautiful and brilliant young woman and care for her tremendously. But it's challenging to develop deep, meaningful relationships with people you have little contact with. 7. For people putting me in the category of the evil stepmother, saying that I see her as other, don't think that I haven't been trying since the beginning. I include her in every way I can in the times that she is with us by doing things like teaching her my family recipes, taking her shopping for clothes so that she doesn't have to bring things back and forth, and attending every school athletic event that I could. I have tried to include her in family vacation planning, but was told by her mother that unless the vacation occurred on a weekend we're scheduled to have with her, then she would not allow us to have the time. This limited our options to local weekend trips, but even then, her mom comes up with some reason she can't join, including surprise trips to another state. I even suggested a family cruise in lieu of a honeymoon to celebrate our new family, but was blocked by her mom. My husband is allowed to take her on extended vacations as long as it's just the 2 of them. I have tried to be flexible in accommodations around holidays by postponing things like Christmas morning so that she can be included. This created frustration in my kids because they felt like they shouldn't have to put their lives aside to accommodate for her. One year when the holiday occurred on one of our planned weekends, I came up with a suggestion of celebrating Christmas on Christmas Eve so we could do the full family thing. My kids weren't thrilled, but they understood. In the end, we didn't end up spending any time with her as her mom told us that she planned on having a dinner party on Christmas Eve and needed my stepdaughter to help her prepare. When the time came for college applications, I was ecstatic to be asked by my stepdaughter to help her with the applications, but soon after was told that her mom hired a professional to help her get into her top choice schools and I was no longer needed. I have tried to have a bond with her with the little time that I have. I have consistently brought up to my husband that I feel like we needed more time with her to help build our relationship at the very least by him maintaining his every other weekend schedule. He has told me that ultimately her mom is her mom and she determines her schedule and how she spends her time. He has also expressed that he fears that if he undermines her mom, then he might lose the time and relationship that he does have with her, and I do not want to be the reason for any sort of break in their relationship. His time/relationship with her hasn't changed, so maybe he doesn't see the need for me/my kids to be involved. But if he doesn't advocate for us, then what am I supposed to do? Update 1. I haven't had the opportunity to have a discussion with my husband about all of this, as I was waiting to speak with my therapist to get advice on the best way to approach the conversation. However, I did receive a phone call this morning from my father-in-law, who I see as an absolute angel of a man. Apparently, my husband told his mom about our argument and my mother-in-law went off, and this is how my father-in-law found out about it. Phil asked me what my side of the story was and I very emotionally told him everything as I listed in the op. I told him it was not my intention to alienate SD in any way and that this whole thing has created a nightmare. After deep breath and slight pause, my Phil said that I did the right thing. A few years ago, my Phil suffered a series of strokes. He said that this prompted him to want to reevaluate the estate to make sure that everything was in order. He is quite old, close to 90, and has a lot of underlying health issues. He and my mill share all of their assets and she is also his POA in case anything happens, and because they have a family trust, he wanted to include her and his sons in the discussion. He told me that he brought up that he wanted to include my children in the family trust. He told me he proposed to allow for 10% of the trust's liquid assets to be split between my two kids to help get a start on life. He then said that my mill pushed back very hard, saying that because my children were not biologically related to their family and they should not be considered. When he asked my husband his thoughts on it, Phil said my husband's response was that it was best to keep it in the family but that he would consider including us in his portion upon his passing if he and I were still together. Phil said this was a surprise because at that point we were still basically newlyweds and was surprised a new husband would even think that way. My mill's response to that was unhappy, saying again we weren't blood and that this was a family issue. Because of the stress caused by the situation, and because of the recent strokes, Phil did not want to press things further. Phil said afterwards, he pulled my husband aside to find out more about what he had meant and to be assured that my kids would be included, and was basically told by my husband that he would do what was best for his family, and the conversation was dropped. Now, Phil said that he didn't push further at this point because he was getting tired from the conversation. But in light of what's happening and how my mill and husband are responding behind closed doors, he felt it was necessary to let me know. He said that SD is set to be more than okay when it comes time, and that my husband is asked to tap into funds to pay for her college so she would not need to take out any loans, which he agreed to. He said he asked my husband if he would do the same for my kids, and that my husband's response was that he would ask when the time came, as my kids did not yet know what was going to happen regarding college admissions. Phil asked me if my husband and I had this conversation. I told him that my husband and I discussions about my kids' school was that they would need to take out loans, finish college, and then we would help pay off half of the loans together once they graduated. My husband has never suggested that anything for my kids' college would be paid for through his family trust. My Phil was very apologetic, saying he should have pushed further as he loves us greatly and feels like he did not do enough. I told him it was not his fault and that he should not feel responsible for any of this, and that I did not want him to feel obligated to make any changes or bring it up with mill/husband because I knew it would create additional stress for him and I wanted him to take care of his peace. He said though his desire would be to do so, that since his wife and he have a joint estate, and that she is POA, that he felt like it would be more trouble than it's worth. He is blind and has a lot of mobility issues, so anything he does he is dependent on her. He also said that based on what he's heard on his side, he felt if he did update his will, then they would likely contest it, which would create a financial burden on my end, and he didn't want to create a negative situation. I told him again that it was okay and that we would be okay in life and that he was not responsible for anything that happened. I told him that my intention wasn't to be added to the trust, just to make a point to my husband, to which he said he understood and agreed. He apologized again, we told each other how much we loved one another, and he ended the call saying he considered me a person of integrity, which is a rare gem. Now that I have this information, I feel like this whole situation brought to light a lot of things I hadn't considered regarding my marriage. Also, writing out everything regarding how my husband navigated his relationship with his daughter/ex-wife really put things into perspective that makes me feel like we were never a priority for him. I'm not sure where to go from here. I plan to bring this all up with my therapist and talk it out to figure out what I should do. But I no longer feel like the off or advocating for my biological family because my husband and his side have been advocating for theirs, Phil excluded.